So do I need to learn frame data in order to get good at Tekken? Yes, you do. Sorry, I hate to break it to you, but math and numbers is a huge part of this game. You're gonna need to learn some of that stuff when you want to get good at any fighting game. It's not just necessarily pertaining to Tekken only. Street Fighter has frame data as well. Mortal Kombat has frame data. Some of the lesser known fighting games, all of them have frame data that involve knowledge and labbing, like going into practice mode like you see on screen right now and figuring out what frames even mean. The game is hard capped at 60 frames per second, and every move and every input you do in the game is going to take a specific amount of frames before it's either fully impacted on the opponent or before it's fully extended in its animation, and then it requires more frames on recovery once the animation is over. So, for example, a jab. If I throw a jab out, it takes time for Kazuya to not only throw the jab out, but also come back from the animation. You see that at the end there. I'm recovering from the jab animation. So that's what's called recovery frames. We're going to go into recovery frames a little bit later on. For now, we're going to discuss impact frames. What is an impact frame? Well, an impact frame is the initial startup time. Startup frames is another way to put this. Attack startup frames, you'll see on the very bottom of the corner of the screen there. Attack startup frames in the bottom right. You'll see 10 there for jabs. That's because a jab is a 10-frame move. This is universal for every character in the game, which means that a jab is exactly 1/60th of a second in speed, from the time that you initiate the move until the time that the move connects to the opponent. That's a 10-frame window, and that is the speed of the move, 1/60th of a second, because Tekken is hard capped at 60 frames per second. So, every single second, 60 frames of animation have gone by. That's the allotted time for 60 frames of animation to have gone by. So every second that's on screen, we're seeing the same 60 frames implemented over and over in a loop, sort of. At least for the characters and what they're doing on screen at the moment. So essentially, frames equals time. So if a jab is 1/60th of a second to come out to impact the character that you're fighting against, then it's 10 frames. There are different frames for every move in the game. 10 frames is the fastest of any move in the game. There are a couple exceptions to this with a move that Yoshimitsu has called Flash, which is I believe it's a 6-frame move, but it has almost no range. It's meant specifically to basically counter your opponent. It's sort of like a reversal, if anything. It's more akin to that than an outright attack. You can use it offensively, but it's still considered a reversal. Same thing applies to King's forward 1+2. That move is actually a 9-frame move. That little shove that he does, it's a 9-frame move, but because there's 2 forward inputs, the first forward actually takes 1 frame of time, so that move is actually 10 frames in total to come out. But that's more advanced information. We're gonna just stick to the basics for now. How can I use this knowledge to my advantage now? Okay. What is the deal? How do I know when it's my turn to attack regarding the frames? Like, what indicates my turn? Well, you see on the bottom screen there, well, I'm going to use a different move for that. But we'll stick to jab for a bit. Frame advantage. You see on the bottom of the screen there, it says frame advantage, right? Frame advantage is +8. That means that I have now earned myself, by hitting with this jab, an extra 8 frames of whatever the hell I want to do. So because I have 8 frames of advantage, my opponent now has 8 frames less of advantage, right? So that's why it says -8 for Nina there on the left. She's at -8. If we're in neutral, you notice that the frames just say 0, attack startup frame 0, recoverable damage, all that stuff is irrelevant. Just focus on the frame advantage. We're just standing in the neutral. This is typically what we would call the neutral game in the fighting game community. The FGC says that this is the neutral game. Neither player is making an attack, neither player is advancing on the other, neither one has frame advantage. 0 and 0 is what we're both at, typically, when we're moving around like this, right? Now, as soon as somebody throws out an attack, they are vulnerable to get counter hit, but if the move hits, you are then able to get advantage. depending on the move, of course. Certain moves are actually minus on block, like lows, -4. So if I hit with this move, for example, the down 4 for Kazuya, I have less frame advantage. It's actually my opponent's turn still, even though I have just connected with an attack. Normally that's not the case. Normally when you connect with an attack, it's still your turn, because most moves are plus frames on hit, which means it's still your turn, you have the advantage. If 0 and 0 is neutral, allowing both players to have a time to attack, because if you're in the neutral game, either player can make a decision and attack at any point, and it's fair game for either player. So then obviously, if someone's in the minus, they are at less of an advantage, and therefore it's not necessarily their turn to attack. If someone is in plus frames, like Kazuya with +8, it's absolutely my turn to attack. Even +1 is good. +8 is insane. That's why jabs are so strong. People underestimate how good jabs are on a regular basis. Jabs, this is the best move in the game. Everybody has this shit. You got 10 frames, man. +8 frame advantage, which means it's 100% your turn after no matter what. +8 frames now means that a move that would normally come out at, say, 14 frames, right? Like my Kazuya's down forward 2 is a 14 frame mid. 14 frames it takes from the time that I execute the move until it connects with the opponent, or at the earliest possible point that it can connect with the opponent. It takes 14 frames for that time to elapse. But if I'm at +8, this now becomes a 6-frame attack. The reason that's confusing for people is because how the fuck do you get 8 and 14 and my opponent's -8 and that's a 14? What does this mean? It's just, honestly, it's just basic mathematics. I'm at +8, which means I have more frames to work with now. I have 8 extra frames, which means my 14 frame thing, I get to, those 8 frames I get to spend using my down forward 2. I get to turn that 14 frame move into a 6 frame move, because 14 minus 8, the 8 frames that I've just gained from hitting this jab, 14 minus those 8 frames is 6 frames. And guess what? The fastest move in the game is 10 frames, no matter what. So Nina, once she gets hit with a jab, she's at -8. If she tries to jab at that point, her jab is going to come out at 18 frames, not 10 frames like a jab normally would. Why is that? Because she's already -8. So those extra 8 frames are added onto her jab time. That's 18 frames. That's an 18 frame jab. That's terrible. Why would you do that? In other words, don't mash if you're at -8. You probably shouldn't mash if you're at -4 or more. -3 is okay, because then your jabs turn into 13 frame moves. But say you want to do, I don't know, like let's just do record a move with Nina real quick. She wants to do a down forward 1, right? So that down forward 1 is, we're going to turn this one off and just do the down forward 1. You see that? It's -1. So Nina's down forward 1 at -1 on block for her is insanely good. That's a crazy strong down forward 1. Nina has one of the strongest down forward 1s in the game, because all that does is it then just turns her jab into an 11 frame move, which is still insanely fast, which allows her to continue her pressure. -1 is essentially neutral. You don't have to worry so much. -2, you gotta worry a little more, because then your jab, if you try to mash out a jab when you're at -1, it then becomes an 11 frame jab. Mashing out a jab at -2 becomes a 12 frame jab, which means more things can interrupt it. Like Kazuya can now interrupt you with this shit, and now you're looking at a little more damage. -3 is definitely the highest number I'd say it is safe to consistently try to mash out your moves, because a jab is then 13 frames, which still beats this stuff, you know? Like, your jab will still beat my down forward 2 if you're at -3. Your jab will still definitely beat my down forward 1 if you're at -3. So it's not the end of the world if you mash out at -3. But once you start getting a little bit higher than that, -4, -5, it's best to just sit back and chill. You're at a significant frame disadvantage, and your jab's starting to become a bit of a problem. It's more susceptible to typical down forward 1s, that are 13 frames on impact, which means it takes 13 frames for the move to come out. Like, for example, Kazuya has down forward 4. That's his 13 frame poke, quote unquote. Not a great poke, but it's got good range and decent damage, and it's +2 on hit, so that's solid. So now, because I'm +2 with Kazuya, this 13 frame poke, if I mash out 2 in a row, like that, the second one essentially becomes an 11 frame poke. Because it's 13 frames initially, if it connects, I get those extra 2 frames to play with, because I'm at +2, and now it becomes an 11 frame poke. On paper, it's still 13 frames startup, but because my opponent has fewer frames to play with, due to being at -2, I get to mash this out for free, without really being fearful of interruption beyond jab interrupt. Like, that's essentially the only thing Nina can really do at this point. She can dick jab me, and she can just straight on jab me. But besides that, if she gets hit with a down forward 4, she's gonna eat the follow-up down forward 4 most of the time if she's mashing out anything but jab. So, because I think the second fastest move Nina has is 11 frames, if I'm not mistaken. Let's just check that out. So Nina has, her 11 frame, standing 4. So my down forward 4 at 13 frames and her standing 4 at 11 frames will then trade, because we have 2 frames of exchange there. She's at -2, I'm at +2. So my 13 frame and her 11 frame then become just as fast as one another, and they trade. So now I'm going to take you through a sequence of moves that Nina's just going to throw out at me, just some random pokes. Some of them are good, some of them aren't. And I want you to pay attention to the frame advantage on the bottom left corner of the screen, down in that area over there, fucking way off to the side there, where it says attack startup frames, frame advantage, and all that stuff. Pay attention to the frame advantage numbers, specifically. So how detrimental or beneficial the moves that she's throwing out to me happen to be on block, on hit, things of that nature. We're going to go through that right now. So let's record this shit. All right, we're good to go. Let's do it. -1, -5, -7, -4, +8 because I got hit, +1 on block, so that move's really good. +1 on block's really good. -2, -4 because that was a low that I got hit with. +5, -4, -5. Like, these are all solid moves. Every single move she's throwing out at me would be considered safe on block, right? That is a term that we're going to use for punishment, and I'm going to talk about punishment in the next video. This video is specifically addressing just frame data and breaking it down for you on what exactly frames mean. So everything up until -10 on block is safe. So even though you're at a minus frame advantage, if you do a move that's say -4 or -5, you can still immediately block after. And it doesn't matter what your opponent throws at you after that, you will be able to block in time and not receive any damage dealt to you for free. Unless the move that you do is -10 or more on block. -10 is susceptible to jab punish. So if Nina does a move that's -10, I can get this shit for free. Because that's a jab punish for Kazuya. So I can't get other things, like if I wanted to, I couldn't get this out because she would block this in time. She's only -10, she's not -11, and look at the attack startup frames. This move comes out at 11 frames. So no matter what, Nina would be able to block my back 1 retaliation after I've blocked her move that has put her in -10. Because back 1 for Kazuya is 11 frames on startup, not 10 frames. So she blocks within 1 frame of time. As long as the player is holding back. If they're not holding back, obviously everything's fucking punishable. But, at the end of the day, hold fucking back after you've done a move, please. Stop just mashing buttons out. I know Nina players especially love to just press all the friggin' time, but it's cool to just chill every now and again. Because you do need to observe what your opponent's gonna do in terms of retaliation, most of the time, more often than the moves that you are wanting to throw out at them. Because defense, even though Tekken 8 is a very aggressive game, defense is still far more important to learn, and it's a lot more difficult to learn. So start when you're very, very new to the game, still floating around in them green, yellow, orange ranks, brand new players, you know, just focus on the basics. Frame data is maybe not such a basic concept, but it's absolutely important to know, and it's not as confusing as you'd think. All you have to know is attack startup frames, plus frames on block, and plus frames on hit, minus frames on block, minus frames on hit. You know? Things like that. Those are the moves of your character are what you should be focusing on first. Find out your character's top 10 moves, the frame data regarding those moves, and then implement that in a game in real time and see if you can yield some success out of it. So, for example, if I'm using Kazuya, the moves I'm going to be using most often are obviously jab, obviously electric because it's a crazy fast, amazingly strong launcher. Forward 4 is ridiculous because it's plus 4 on block. So if my opponent blocks my forward 4, I can get anything I want after pretty much for free. It's not guaranteed, but I can keep pressuring. This is a really good move. It's a fantastic move. Obviously, it's a bit slow. It's 19 frames on startup, so it can be interrupted. But if Nina blocks it, you see that? Plus 4 frame advantage, which means she now has a 14 frame jab at least. If she does anything fat or slower than a jab, she's just going to be at even more of a frame detriment. So she just wants to sit back and chill. It's at minus 4 that she's just gotten hit by forward 4 by Kazuya. You don't want to press any buttons into that. Because if Kazuya wants, he can just do this into this. And forward 4 into down forward 2 is guaranteed if I can get Nina to block this shit. See? Because I'm at plus 4, her jab becomes 14 frames. Now, if we add that up, she's mashing out a jab because the player is really aggressive and they don't want to stop pressing buttons, but they've just blocked a forward 4, but I don't care, I'm going to mash jab out anyways. That's a 14 frame jab you just mashed out, and I'm mashing out down forward 2 because what I've just done is I've created a frame trap for my opponent. Players that are brand new to the game, they don't necessarily understand the concept of frames or turns, when it's your turn, when it's not your turn. Sometimes it's okay to mash, because when an opponent is being respected way too much, they're gonna get away with more shit than they should. Respecting a player means you're just blocking a lot. Like, you're not really taking your turn as much as you should be. Maybe because you're afraid, maybe because you just don't have enough matchup knowledge to really understand when it is your turn, so you don't want to press buttons just in case, and that's something that comes with experience, time, and going into practice mode, labbing the characters, figuring out exactly when to attack, when it's appropriate, when the frames of their attacks are over, when it is a minus on block frame advantage, or when it's a punishable move. You need to learn all of these things. So just learn the top 10 moves of your character, maybe the top 20. Find out the frame data regarding those moves specifically. Learn how that works in a match. And then when you really get your ass kicked by a character, take them to practice mode and learn how to do punishment training. Punishment training is what we'll go over in the next video, but that's all concerning frame data. If I wanted to get Nina to block my jab, I'll just go back into offensive training and say, block all. So Nina's going to block my jab, but look at that. Well, hold on, she's at standing real quick. So block all, and then block all second action. So she's not going to eat anything. She's just going to block everything I throw at her now, right? I'm still at +1 after the jab, so I can still just throw out another jab. This is why jab pressure is so effective at lower ranks. Why are you always getting hit by jabs when people start doing this in your face? It's because jabs are plus on block. It's still your turn, even after your opponent has blocked your jab. That's crazy. That's another reason why jabs are so good. +1 means that the fastest move they can throw out at you is 11 frames. There's no move. So your jab is at 10 frames, is now faster than anything that they can possibly throw out at you. So the only answer to jab would be to duck or to sidestep. Those two are the options to jab, because jab is very linear, so you can sidestep a jab, and you can definitely duck a jab, because as you can see on screen here, it's a high. High moves can be ducked. Mid moves, middle, those can't be ducked. Don't duck a mid. Never duck mids. In fact, don't ever duck, to be honest. Just eat the frickin' lows. Low pokes like this are not that scary. Even big ones like this shit. This is minus 12 on block, which means if Nina blocks my down back 4, she can punish me for that. But until your opponent gives you a reason to block low, don't do it. There's zero reason to block low. Blocking low in Street Fighter and in Mortal Kombat it's a good idea. Blocking low, just holding back and blocking low is a fantastic idea. Holding down back and blocking low. But in Tekken it gets you killed because fucking mids are crazy, dude. Kazuya's mids are insane. Like, this move's a launcher. This is plus 4 on block. You know, this is a crazy heat engager. He's got this shit. This is a crazy heat engager as well. Minus 19, but it's got a lot of friggin' pushback. Minus 19, by the way, incredibly punishable. But if you can't get to the player in time before they recover, which most characters actually can't, this move's pretty free. I can just throw this shit out. Most people don't have any idea how to punish it. It's a very specific punish for every character in the game because of the pushback. Look how far away she is after the move is finished. Minus 19 doesn't necessarily mean anything in that scenario because frame advantage is irrelevant when the both opponents are so far away from each other they can't retaliate. So this move is only super dangerous for Kazuya to throw out when your opponent knows how to punish it and against a wall, because there's zero pushback against the wall, so Nina can just get it down forward too and launch me for pretty much death. So that's the thing about frame advantage concepts that you'll always want to keep in mind, is frame advantage isn't always what you think it is, because Tekken is a fucked up game. So pushback matters. Don't block low unless your opponent gives you a reason to block low. This isn't really pertaining to frame data, I know, but in a sense it is, because if you just hold back and you just guard, you're gonna defeat mids, you're gonna defeat highs, which are, highs are decent, mids are the strongest moves in the game typically, and lows are scary, but they're mostly just chip damage. Like, you're not really gonna be taking a lot of damage, even with a big low poke like that. This is plus 4 on hit, but regardless, even though this is a big scary low on hit, because it's plus 4, does some pretty decent damage, just avoid blocking low unless your opponent gives you a reason to, like when they start throwing out hell sweeps, right? Like, even, like, these moves are scary enough. But when a person starts doing this shit, hell sweeps that's scary. That's when you want to block low. Until they start throwing that shit out, though, consistently, don't block low. Because you're just going to be potentially eating a bunch of big-ass mids. Just because you're afraid of these little shits. Who gives a fuck about these little things? These do nothing. This shit is dangerous. This is the shit you need to worry about. Why the fuck are you blocking low when I haven't even done this bullshit yet? Or this bullshit, Like, the big lows are what you need to worry about. But don't block low in this game as a rule. Typically, you don't want to do that. Especially against certain characters. Because they don't have any lows to threaten you with. Like, for example, Brian, Steve, Asuka, Shaheen. These characters don't really have big lows to threaten you with. So just stand guard against these guys, and you'll be fine. Lee as well, another character with some good lows on paper, but they're not actually that strong. He's got nothing if you just hold the back button. So keep that in mind, and stand block, and then you won't even have to worry about your frame disadvantage or anything like that when getting hit by lows. Because if you take a low, oftentimes, knowing that standing up beats mids and highs, and that you will take some low damage, but knowing that, most of the time low pokes are actually, well, I got counter hit set on right now, so that's a problem, but turn off counter hit. This is the only low that I have that's actually plus on block, or on hit, sorry. That's the only low I have that Kazuya has. Look at all these other lows. This one is plus 4 on hit. So it's a good low that builds momentum. It's the same thing earlier as this move, forward 4 on block. A mid that's plus on block and a low that's plus on hit are virtually the same thing. They're both moves you utilize to get frame advantage to retain your turn and regain your momentum or maintain your momentum. Maintaining momentum in a fight in Tekken is super important. So when you do things like that, if I want her to, stand block. So she's gonna block my mid. She's at I'm at +4, I'm at +4. +4, +4. Those two moves do pretty much the same thing. You're always gonna have frame advantage maintained in that sense. So it's still Kazuya's turn after I've hit her with that. With my +4 forward 4 or my +4 down back 4. But look at the damage. Why would I want to hit, or why would I want to block this, when this is so scary? You know, now Kazuya gets some crazy fucking mix-up, and, like, screw that shit. I'm stand blocking all goddamn day long, you know? And especially when highs, highs are crazy good too, you know? But at least when you block standing up, you're always going to have an answer to the high. Ducking a high is something that's going to come with time and experience. Ducking your highs and launch punishing, that's something that you'll have to focus on later on down the road. This video's not for that. To wrap things up real quick, you can break it down to there's a neutral game where both of you guys are at 0, and that's where either of you can throw out any move at any time. Frame disadvantage is when you're in the minus, which means typically it's not your turn. You can decide to not respect that and mash in your opponent's face even though you may be in the minus. Sometimes it works, most of the time you get fucked up for it. So it really is a gamble when you're at minus frames whether or not you want to retaliate. If you've observed your opponent and they like to do big moves after they put you in a situation where you're minus on block or minus on hit, say Kazuya does like a typical down back 4 into forward 4-3. After this hits, he goes for this every single time. Every single time this Kazuya player does this. Well, that forward 4-3 is ridiculously slow. That's 20 frames startup. 21 frames if you add the extra forward, which you have to. So it's actually a 21 frame move. When you see a Kazuya player, or a player playing any character doing things like that, where they put you in only +4 or so, and then the next step they do is they throw out this big-ass mid that takes forever and a fucking day to come out, in that case, yeah, go ahead and mash out your jabs or your 15-frame launcher. Because if Nina wanted to, if I hit her with, let's do a defense trading thing real quick. So I got Nina recorded. She's doing the down forward 2, and she's just mashing that shit out. So the idea here is that I'm going to go for a down back 4, it's going to connect, and then I'm going to immediately go for a forward 4-3 to try to launch her, because I'm at +4 frame advantage, and it's still my turn, quote-unquote. Right, okay? So just keep that in mind for this little experiment. So you see what happened right there? I went for down back 4 and then a forward 3. But because Nina was mashing out that down forward 2, which is a 15 frame move, my 21 frame forward 3 is way too fucking slow even at +4. So yes, it's my turn. But if I choose to go for a big ass move, her down forward 2 is still gonna beat it out, because it's even at -4. It still comes out at like, it's at 15 frames with a -4 frame advantage. So essentially she brings that down forward 2 out at 19 frames. My 21 frame forward 4-3 is gonna lose to that every time, even though I'm at +4. So that's the deal here that you need to keep in mind. Plus frames aren't always advantage. So now I hope you have a little more understanding of what a frame is, what an impact frame is. Attack startup frames are something that you want to keep an eye on. Frame recovery, that shit matters. We'll explain a little more about that in the punishment video we'll do next time. Plus frames on hit and block, minus frames on hit and block, what that stuff means, what a poke is, and how pokes are good as far as frame advantage goes, and how that can work to your benefit. and how blocking low can be detrimental to you because it's not necessarily necessary. So, especially when you just see now that things like this, most low pokes in the game, most of them that a lot of characters have, are gonna put them at a minus frame advantage, which means it's your turn after you get hit with their low anyways. So, keep that in mind, and yeah, hope you got something out of this video, because goddamn, this is a hard bitch to explain. But anyways, keep rocking out, keep gaming, we'll see you on the next one.